What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to click on another video. And today we're going to be talking about the latest film that's a collaboration from Steven Soderbergh and David Koepp, and that film is called Black Bag. Directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by David Koepp, this film stars an absolutely fantastic cast. People like Michael Fassbender, Cate Blanchett, Tom Burke, Pierce Brosnan, Naomi Harris, and many, many more. And before we get too far into this video, if you guys are a fan of up-to-date reviews like this, as well as early reviews, retrospective reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog, then you're in the right place, and I'd like to ask you to consider subscribing. But if you're a returning viewer, well, thanks so much for coming back once again. And as I already mentioned, today we're talking about the latest collaboration from Steven Soderbergh and David Koepp that's called Black Bag. And just a couple of months ago, they actually released Presence, which is a film I've already reviewed here on the channel. It's a film I liked, but I didn't love, and I was actually really surprised when I started seeing the trailers come out for Black Bag so shortly after Presence, and the fact that the two of them had a brand new film coming right around the corner. It's not something you see very often with a lot of directors. If you see a quick turnaround, sometimes it's the next year, but this is a pretty quick turnaround for Steven Soderbergh and David Koepp. So before we get into my thoughts on this film though, let's get into what this film is all about. When intelligent agent Catherine Woodhouse, played by Cate Blanchett, is suspected of betraying the nation, her husband, played by Michael Fassbender, also a legendary agent, faces the ultimate test of whether to be loyal to his marriage or his country. Going into this film, it looked like a good, fun espionage spy thriller film with a nice romantic element in there, and I was really mainly intrigued by the really star-studded cast. Michael Fassbender is the main person we focus on here as the character of George Woodhouse, who is an agent, of course, in this intelligence agency, and when he gets the suspicion that his wife is up to no good, he tries to start uncovering if she is the person he's looking for or if there's somebody else at play here that is kind of manipulating things. Throughout the course of the film though, you have a ton of fantastic cast members, Cate Blanchett being one of the main ones, of course, as his wife, Catherine Woodhouse, and I was honestly really impressed by the cast here. I mean, I was consistently just so enamored by the fact that you have a star-studded cast here, and Steven Soderbergh has always been a director that I've always really appreciated. While I don't love all of his films, I always appreciate his different approaches to every single movie that he does. And when you look at a film like Presence that just recently came out, and you look at a movie like this, they could not be more different. I think people could watch both of those films and never even in their wildest imaginations imagine that it came from the exact same filmmakers. And I think Steven Soderbergh here really showcases some of the strength he has as a director around dialogue heavy films. This isn't a film that's going for big over-the-top cinematography. For the most part, it's a pretty quiet film that's predominantly dialogue heavy and isn't really a film that's going for excitement. This isn't a film that you're going to for action espionage. Instead, this is a film that's far more about the drama. It's far more about the dialogue, and it took a little bit to kind of get into the groove of this film. At the very beginning of the film, you're jumping straight into the relationships of the various individuals who work at this intelligence agency, and there's this element of having to kind of pick up on a lot of the lingo and understand where things are coming from and what their personal perspectives are, who these characters are, what they mean to one another, and what their history is. And I actually really enjoyed slowly getting to be revealed to who all these characters are and what their connections are. And it's one of those films that I could see myself revisiting and feeling like I can connect to the beginning of the film far more than I did when I watched it this first time, simply because as you start to unravel more about these characters, you become far more ingrained in the lingo. You find yourself far more ingrained in what this world is all about. And I think that this film does a good job of not really spoon feeding you as an audience member, but instead allowing you to kind of just sit there as a witness. And a lot of that is what I really felt with the camera work in this film, because majority of it is pretty straightforward shots. The camera very rarely moves in this film. As I mentioned before, it's a fairly quiet film. There is a musical score to the film, but a lot of the film is quiet. There's not a musical score that's playing throughout a lot of the sequences. It's usually in between scenes or just in certain sequences where characters are moving from one location to the next. For the most part, this is a very silent film that's honing in on that dialogue, and it really is in those dialogue moments that you get to know who these characters are. And I think all of the cast members here give a phenomenal performance. Michael Fassbender being the main star here, his performance really kind of reminded me of what he did in The Killer just a couple years ago. I really enjoyed his performance here. There's almost a robotic, very intellectual approach to the way that he plays this character, somebody who is very in tune with what they're trying to do and almost doesn't even feel human-like. He's very much pulling from various performances he's done in the past, from like in the Alien franchise and like what I mentioned before with The Killer. I enjoyed what he had here. There was a methodical approach to his character that I thought was interesting. Cate Blanchett, of course, is fantastic as always, very much giving us that Cate Blanchett charm that you've seen in other films. I don't know that she necessarily does anything here that's super different from what we've seen in a lot of other films that she's done, but I do think she gives a really great performance here, and I thought that the chemistry between her and Michael Fassbender as this husband and wife, with a little bit of that mistrust in the middle, was really interesting. And I think the title of the film allows for there to be some intrigue in terms of how these characters move around one another, because the term black bag is something that they'll have to say to one another if they can't necessarily divulge information about what they're doing within this agency, including married couples like Catherine and George, which I thought to be an interesting thing. Anytime that they're going to go do something that is classified, they'll say black bag. And so it allows the characters to lie to one another if they need to. It also allows them to kind of keep secrets from one another, even if they don't want to. And I found that to be a really interesting dynamic in the film, because it's never really overly utilized in a way where it feels kind of cheap, but instead is utilized in a way where you can understand where the characters are coming from, and you don't know necessarily whether or not the characters are trying to lie and try to get themselves out of a certain situation, or if it's a situation where they're, trying to be honest, but they just can't be. I thought that it was pretty well used for the most part. And I think for the most part, this isn't a film that 100% kind of televises who the villain is. There's not this element of watching the film and feeling like, oh yeah, I know exactly who the bad guy is here right out of the gate. The film does a good job of allowing you to kind of wonder, is this person the bad guy? Maybe making you think that this person's the bad guy for a percentage of it, and slowly starting to uncover things as Michael Fassbender's character is slowly starting to uncover things at the same time. For the most part, I think this film did a really great job when it came down to the dialogue. I think it's well shot, despite the fact that the cinematography is pretty straightforward, but I think the look of the areas that they're in, the scenery, the costume design, the set design very much gave it this 70s spy espionage vibe to it, while it is more of a modernized film. I thought the cast across the board was really great. There was a great sense of intrigue, and while this film is slow in a lot of areas, this isn't necessarily a film, like I mentioned before, that I would call exciting. It is a film that kept my intrigue and consistently kept me engaged as to what was going to happen next, and I was really finding myself more and more glued to the dialogue, which is always really what you want. You want a script that is able to bring you in. But with that said, I do see this being a film that could bore some. I don't necessarily know that this is going to be a film for everybody. If you don't really like slow burn films, or films that are dialogue heavy and don't really have too much in terms of action or a lot of very exciting moments, then I don't necessarily know that this is going to be the film for you. But for me, it really worked when it came down to characters and an interesting script, and in a world where we have a lot of films that feel like they have to have big booms and big bams to kind of pull audiences in. It's nice that Steven Soderbergh and David Koepp decided to go with a film here that feels far more personal about the characters and gives us a world that is different. You get to get a peek behind this intelligence agency's kind of doings and how they kind of go about things. And I thought the cast members all really came together to understand what kind of film they were in and brought all their characters to the forefront in a way that felt very realistic. All these characters feel like intriguing people in their own ways. I can't say I loved every character, but I think all the actors are great in the film, and I think that there was a great sense of intrigue while watching it, and I consistently found myself engaged. This is definitely a film that in the early part of the year I can definitely say is a standout for me so far, and I look forward to seeing what the next Steven Soderbergh film is. Maybe he has another one coming out in a few months, who knows? But in all seriousness, this is a film I recommend. While it does meander in some areas, and while it is a little slow at times, I ultimately found it to be a really solid time that I think is really going to be great for big film fans who want a nice tight script. And I think that while this film might not work for others, it definitely worked for me. So that's going to be my thoughts on Black Bag. Definitely looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about this film. Did you like this film? Did you not like this film? Are you planning to check the film out? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.